talking more about general education teachers and what we need to do as part of a shared responsibility. My background is I've worked as a due process hearing officer for many years, and then I also train individuals. And you'll hear stories about that as we interact with this. But what I want to start with is I want to start with two cases that I've been involved in just this past year. Give you some sense of where we are with this. They're not part of the slides. I just added them because I really want to give some sense of where we are with this. Okay? First one, Josh, 7th grade boy. Pretty significant learning disability. He spent a lot of time in the general education classroom, though. How much? He spent all of his science and social studies in the general education classroom. And what was posing a problem for him is that you can see this is he was having behavior problems. And I know that many of you don't have students who have behavior problems, but we can get you some if you need some. We have some extras, okay? There's going to be a bus at the basement when you leave. You can take some of these kids home with you. The hard part is you have to store them over the weekend before you go to your school on Monday. Okay? But we have extras, but we can pass them out to you. He was having significant behavior problems. What kind of problem? So when I say behavior problems, let me explain. He was being kicked out of his class 4 out of 5 days a week. Okay? He really was. He was being kicked out of his class and sent out into the hall. And those of you who understand how good halls are, is that's actually where gangs are formed. Is because the kids, at self-selection, they see other kids in the halls, they realize these kids must be cool, and they meet up later, and that's how these things start. So don't do that. But it's interesting about this, but he was being kicked 4 out of 5 days a week. And the district and the parents actually talked to the gen ed teacher multiple times and said, my son keeps getting kicked out of class. And what's interesting about this is the gen ed teacher said, well, he's got LD, what do you expect? I'm not making this up, all right? So it's interesting. So I really pay. I'll tell you the stuff later that I make up. But it's interesting about this, okay? What I make up, give you an example, is I teach undergrads. And those of you who are undergrads in here, I apologize, but I'm going to make fun of you, is that undergrads are often, my classes don't have a clue. I teach the undergrad intro to special ed class. It's a bunch of 19-year-olds who don't know anything. So I make up stuff all the time. Like all kids with Down syndrome are left-handed. The bumps on the freeway are for the blind drivers. And they said, no, that's not true. And I said, have you ever seen anybody really swerve when driving? They said, yeah, that person was blind. And so, yeah, and that's why we have Braille and drive-up ATM. And they said, okay, I'm going with this, okay? Okay? But it's interesting about this, but you can see, parents they get concerned. I mean, seriously, this kid, Josh, was having significant problems. They knew at the end of the first marking period that he was having problems. And there's 4 marking periods in the school district. End of the first marking period, he was failing social studies and science. And the second marking period, he was failing social studies and science. I mean, he's getting kicked out of 4 out of 5 days of the class, things like this. You imagine how that might do to your class, things like that. And the third marking period, they also knew the problems. And end of each marking period, the parents came to the school district and said, we would like something to change. Okay? We'd like something to change. And to the third marking period, they say, okay, yeah, we should make some changes, but it's too close to the end of the school year. We'll just make the changes for the following year. Right? Why I bring this story to you is Josh, as a kid, suffered. He suffered. He does not choose to have a learning disability. He does not choose to have behavior. So what basically we were finding, you'll appreciate what was happening in this class. Right? What's happening in this class is and this is an instructional method you guys should strongly consider because it's ridiculously easy, not very effective, but ridiculously easy, is the teacher would have the students in the first row read the first seat of the first row read the first line in the sentence of the book. Second, or read the second line, third, fourth, and about 3 or 4 people before it got to Josh, he would yell, kick, scream, throw, fart, whatever he needed to do to get kicked out of the classroom. All right? He did not want to be embarrassed in front of his peers. It was the easiest choice he made each day. Tater tots or French fries was a harder choice for him at lunch. So he'd get kicked out of his class. And we found this out because why was he only being kicked out of 4 out of 5? Well, on day 5, there was a test. So there was no reading required. And I don't know if you know anything about teaching. If you don't see the material for 4 days, you don't do so well in the test. So he was doing poorly in the classes, things like this. So parents got a lawyer, and there was no complaints from this district, but this was the common teaching method that was being used. There was no adaptations. There was no specially designed instruction. There was no modifications for these kids, and it posed a significant problem. And these kids were having problems. So wait, okay? So and additionally, this is what I'm seeing. You'll pay attention to this. Josh, what's interesting, when he was in elementary school, he was getting 2 hours a day of services for language arts, spelling, reading, and writing. 2 hours a day. When he transitioned to middle school, somehow he got cured of the need of needing 2 hours of services, and they cut him down to 48 minutes a day, because that's what would fit the schedule. And many of you have probably seen this and experienced with this. And so what happened is they, through administrative convenience, changed his designation from getting 2 hours to 48 minutes. There's no evaluation that said he didn't need this. There was no evidence that said he didn't need this, but it was just solely on administrative convenience. Okay? And we often make these decisions based on administrative convenience, and we need to make it based on data that is individualized to the child. Okay? So I talk about this, is when we make these decisions based on the child's label, the child's things like this, we're inappropriately doing what's going on. If they had an evaluation that said he no longer needed that, that's fine. That's fine. But I know that many of you, the way you're nodding your head, understand exactly what I'm talking about here. And how this kid, so what happened is he started exhibiting significant behavior problems. He's sitting in a 7th grade science class. He's not getting the material. He reads like at a 2nd or 3rd grade reading level. He's not getting the instruction in how to do this, and we're not providing adaptations for him on how to do these things. And this poses a significant problem. And this poses a significant problem because he's not learning. And therefore we're not teaching. Okay? So what we have to think about this is, how do we individualize for these kids? How do we provide assistance for these kids so that they can actually do what they're supposed to be doing? And it needs to be a team thing. But wait, I got another story for you. All right? Hey, but before I tell you, there were 7 other kids who had very similar kinds of things going on in their schools. So when they talk about this, we have to think about what's going on and how this impacts the school as a whole, and what's going on when these kids are not getting services. So what I did is I went into the school and we developed training plans so that if we tracked these kids from elementary to middle school better, we tracked where they were going, we paid attention to what they're doing, and we actually evolved a program that was individualized based on what the kids need as opposed to what was administratively provided for them. And you have to think about these and pay attention to these things. Okay? So the next one, all right? This is a sad one. Not that the other one was happy. Okay? This is a sad one. And so Josh and Elle are not the real names. These are my next door neighbors. They don't know they have disabilities. Okay? I just did a case study book. Josh had a case, both have things like that. Elle, same thing. 6th grade girl, 504 for ADHD. And what's interesting about this is the problem she was having relating to this. Now, there's a document that I'm going to send to the team here on how to write 504s. Some of you may have seen this before. I'm going to show it to you real fast as we talk about this. Come pull up. Come on. Pull. Right? Okay. Many people don't know about 504s. And so what I'm doing is, and as a hearing officer, I was seeing a lot of people inappropriately writing 504s. And why this is so very important is general education teachers are the ones solely implementing 504s. And we provide, and I speak as a representative of higher education, is we do, I think the technical term is, a piss poor job of talking about 504s as a part of our training programs. Okay? I think on the continuum of piss to poor, it's in there, it's down there. Right? But we have individuals going to 504 meetings who don't understand the difference between accommodations and modifications. We have individuals who don't understand what to do as a part of this. So I wrote this 504 document, which we will gladly share. And I'm putting it out here now because I'm going to be writing a book on this starting in April, and I will lose the ability to share this. So I'm sending it out now, so I lose copyright. But what I have for you here is we'll come back to Ella in a minute, but it's a 504 accommodations guide that talks about what is a 504, how to write a 504 plan, and then accommodations by specific disabilities. What I did is I surveyed all the districts in my area, and we found out the most common disabilities we have for 504 plans, and we wrote accommodations for them and tried to come up with something like this. And so you can see, and I'll show it to you in a second, but you can see what we did is we just came up with some basic things. And this is a document that I want to send out, and I want general education teachers to read because we're not doing a good job of talking to gen ed teachers about this. Let me give me 2 examples before I go into this. A person who I walk my dog with, she's a 5th grade teacher. She got her class list this past year. A 5th grade general education teacher, she got her class list, we're out walking her dog, and she saw that 22 of her 25 kids had priority sitting close to the teacher. Okay? So what we talked about is we're walking our dogs around this field. We talked about maybe stacking the kids. Stacking the kids. Think about it as a behavior management technique. Think what, they can't run away. All right, so things like this. So what we did was we ended up putting her classroom in a U-shaped format. It worked really well, U-shaped format. So she'd walk up and down the U, things like this. Those 3 kids who did not have priority seating, she set out in the field because she didn't care. But you can see this. Her husband is a 7th grade teacher. And he teaches science. And what was it? 18 of the 20 kids in his classroom in one class had extensive notebook checks, where they had to do the notebook check, where the kids had to demonstrate that they'd written down the material, the homework assignment, had the right materials, they'd clarified exactly what they were doing, and they understood what was turned in the next day. And each kid took about 2 to 3 minutes to do. So what he was proposing was teaching for 4 minutes, and then lining up the kids for the remaining 44 minutes and going through the notebook checks. But we talked about other activities relating to this. But we don't talk about the needs of general education teachers in 504s. And we really truly don't, because you're the ones, again, implementing these things. And it really is, it's contingent upon you to do these things, and we need your help on this. Because special ed is not involved with these kids at all. So let me walk you through this real briefly. I'm just going to go briefly about this. But it talks about who qualifies. Just to remind you, real quickly, so the example that you can take back to districts with the difference between special ed and 504. Under special ed, it's a 2-part test. You have to have a disability and need a special education teacher. And this is something you need to explain to parents and doctors. There's been an epidemic of doctor's notes where they write, kid has a disability and needs full-time special ed with a full-time aide and full-time transportation. They write it on a little piece of paper about this big with a signature that you can't read and things like this. My best friend's a doctor, so I make fun of him all the time. He also has ADHD, which is wild. Right? But I talk about this. There are kids out there who have disabilities who don't need special education. And so just remind us. And I'm going to give you 3 quick examples. 3 quick examples. My son, when he graduated from high school, there was a kid who attended his high school who was missing his left leg. No dispute that's a disability. You try going without your left leg for a while and see how that works. No dispute that that's a disability. He was doing fine academically and was doing fine socially. Went to a high school that was long from one end to the other. The accommodation, he got 3 accommodations. The first accommodation he got a separate second set of books at home, so he didn't have to carry the books to and from school. Makes sense? Things like this. Second accommodation, so he didn't have to run the mile in gym class. My son, being the joker, said, have him do the half mile. And so, yeah, okay. And the kid did. It was great fun, things like this. The third accommodation was, and this is what you might expect, is when he would leave his class 3 minutes early, get as far as he could. Often he can make it to his next class. But if he couldn't, and when the bell rang, he would plaster himself up against the wall so that the other kids, because they're not paying attention to a kid who's using crutches, because what are kids in high schools doing now on the hall? They're texting and what else? Making out at the same time. It's those of you who are in elementary, you're missing out on this. It's really but it's truly impressive. You think the kids don't have, they're multitasking like crazy. So it really is working. So then he plastered himself against the wall, and as the crowd dissipated, then he had 3 minutes to get into the next class without being counted as tardy. He did not need a special education teacher to walk for him. He just needed those basic accommodations. There was no modification to the curriculum. There was no modification to his tests. There was no modification to the content. He just needed those so that he could participate. Classic example of a kid with a 504. Second example is a kid who had what's called MCS, or multiple chemical sensitivities. If there are certain perfumes, certain sprays, certain things would cause severe airway constriction. And if you've ever seen this happen, you never want to see it again. It's truly terrifying when this happens. She went to high school across the street from a farm, and when they would do the aerial spraying as they were fixing to get ready for the spring planting, I'm from the South, I can say fixing to get ready. Okay? As they were doing this, she would just stay home until either the fumes dissipate or there was a rainstorm. They also, and when they do the sealant on the gym floor, which I love that smell, by the way. I lost a whole bunch of brain cells there. But she could stay home, things like this. She did not need a special education teacher to breathe for her. She just needed the opportunities to do work at home and do these things like this. So when you think about kids with disabilities, there are kids with disabilities who do not need special ed. Parents do not understand this. School board members do not understand this. Doctors don't understand this. So you need to explain this to people and help them understand this. Okay? So, okay, more. What does a 504 plan contain? Important for development, what it contains. Difference between accommodations and modifications. Please push this out to people because people think they're synonyms. They're not. All right? Okay? And then step by step, how to write a 504 plan. Step 1, step 2. I'm not going to walk you through this. Step 3, step 4. I'm going to get to the fun part. Okay? Then we have accommodations by disability. And we're going to start with ADHD first because alphabetically it's there, but also it's the big kahuna. Okay? This is where we're having a lot of things like this. So for every one of these disabilities, we have an example of what the disability is like, 3 valid websites, then a list of possible accommodations for the kid. Okay? And so what I want you to think about, and they're not perfect. It's not a checkoff list. You just don't walk and go, check, 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 check. It has to be individualized to the child. Because for what are the most common accommodations we often write for kids with ADHD is that they get extended time to take tests. Who is the first one who finishes the tests? Okay? So keep these, so it has to be individualized to the child. But you can see this. I'll show you one more real fast. You can see arthritis, asthma, bipolar, cancer, CP, just one we all probably have an understanding of. It also has allergies and it has nut allergies. It doesn't have food allergies, which is an interesting one. That's growing. And as I have food allergies. You would think I would include this. I forgot myself. Right? But you can see they're parallel to each other. So if you're walking into a 504 plan, all you have to read is this one page. You are now in the ballpark to talk about the verbiage that the parents want to address and need to address as a part of this. And you can be really of great assistance to them. So we'll make sure we get this out to you so that you can get this out before you have to pay for it. So, but it really is a great resource the way that many states are actually sending out as a part of what they're doing as pay attention. But it goes on. It's like 60-some pages. I'm just going to, who knows where I'm going to end. Injuries, epilepsy, leukemia, nut allergies. Take this one seriously, folks. All right? And okay, all right, back to this. Back to Ella. She had a 504 for ADHD, which only gave her extra time to take tests. You're going to see that's not what needed her. She failed 5th grade. Okay? Why did she fail 5th grade? The 5th grade teacher had a policy that 20% of her grade was homework. Ella forgetting to turn in the homework. She would do the homework, but she would forget to turn it in. Okay? So she failed 5th grade. Okay? She had one of those expedition-sized backpacks you often see with kids with ADHD, where they put every paper in there, but then they never can find them. Yeah, she had them in there. We somewhere, things like this. And it was mostly homework. She knocked down your grade 20%. It was mostly homework, things like this. She then failed 6th grade for the exact same reason. Okay? And I talk about this is the parents kept asking, can you do something better to help my child? And they kept coming to the teacher and say, she's got a homework issue. She just needs to work on this. All right? So when we talk about shared responsibility on this is a kid who is not receiving special education services. We talk about a kid who needs to get something more than what she's getting, and we need to do a better job for her. Okay? So it's interesting. It gets worse. All right? Well, I don't need that. I can do this here. All right? Okay? Parents were concerned about failing, so at the end of the school year, they went to her. The parents went to the district and said, could you do an evaluation to see if she needs special education? Okay? Okay? They said, we don't do evaluations at the end of the school year. That's basically illegal, but I'm not going to go on that one, things like this. Okay? What is also, let me tell you how it gets worse for her in 7th grade, is the 7th grade, the middle school that she went to, had a policy that if you did not bring in your homework, you had to wear a special orange shirt that day. What? Yeah. And she wore it 174 of the 180 days. To the point where other kids were making fun of her for constantly wearing this shirt. Okay? Who does that? It was the policy of the school. So one of the things I want to talk about as a shared responsibility issue is and it's going to sound really harsh, but please, be a decent human being. Okay? Be a decent human being. Don't call these kids out for their disabilities. 7th grade is hard enough as it is. You may not remember this, but your body went through some things in 7th grade. I'm not going to show you a diagram. All right, things like this, all right, not demonstrating things, but it's tough enough as it is. We need to just make sure that we're not embarrassing these kids any more than we need to and call these kids out. It was a significant problem for this, and these kids were not making progress. They're not doing well. And it really does pose a problem for these kids, all right? So she failed 7th grade. She'd failed 5th grade, she'd failed 6th grade, she'd failed 7th grade, okay? So when we talk about these kids who are failing, kids who are having problems, I want to make sure that you understand that when a kid is having problems in school, they can't often they don't know how to articulate. I'm just going to pick on Ella for a second. In 5th grade, she's having problems. You know what she doesn't do? She doesn't raise her hand and said, "Excuse me, teacher. I'm having great difficulty with some of the assignments and what's going on here. I need additional assistance. Could you help me with whatever I need? Because right now I can't actually identify my big problems. Sincerely, one of your favorite students, Ella. Please help me really soon." Okay? She doesn't say that. What she does is she fails exams. She fails tests. She doesn't turn things in. So when kids are doing these kinds of things, what they're basically doing is they're waving a red flag in your face. You have to read this as a red flag being waved in your face. Now, it doesn't mean you guys are the sole responsibility of people to do these things. You have to at least think about what can we do as a team to help with this? What can we do to help and do some of these things so that we bring it to other people's attention? Okay? And so is it serious? It's very serious. Okay? How serious is, I was involved in, I'm a former due process hearing officer. I was involved in 85 due process hearings last year, helping districts as they move forward. I consulted with the superintendent this morning from 7:30 to 8:45, talking through a problem where a teacher did basically the exact same thing, and then the parents filed a complaint, and no one told the superintendent. No one had told the principal. No one told anybody. You guys understand this. Basically, as those of you who have kids, okay? The few, the proud, things like this. You can handle about anything as long as it's not a surprise. Okay? My dad was a superintendent of schools for many years. He had 38,000 students in his district, and there was always something going on and things like this. His big goal each year was to make it to each school once. He never did it. Right? That's the kind of district he had. And so that's how removed he was. But there were times when principals would be arrested for doing something or punching. Principals are arrested for punching a parent in the parking lot. Okay? We're not exactly sure why. We actually think the principal was drinking. Okay? Okay? Again, I'm not going to demonstrate this for you. But it's interesting about this. So when the police called my dad the next day as a part of the investigation, when the police called, it was the first time he'd heard about that. The technical term is defecation hitting the swinging blades. And so he was, just let your mind go on that one for a while. Yeah, okay, yeah. So he to handle surprises. Not that he was going to defend the principal for punching a parent in the parking lot, but it was you don't do these kinds of things. You don't do these kinds of things. All right? So it handled this. We need to make sure we keep parents fully informed and there are no surprises. So your job, when you have a kid who's having problems like this, you at least try something. I don't care. You try something. Okay? You try something as a part of this. And you try something to help get what's going on out there. And you try to push one of this. So there's a book that I actually, that I get no money for. Hey, pull this up. Okay? That I get no money for, that I think you should have. I don't work with this publisher. I don't work with these authors. I get no money for this book. If there are books that you would like to buy where I get money, I will send you a list. Okay, I think I said this in my session yesterday. I think Amazon has a limit. You can only buy 300 of my books at a time. But if you would like to try, I think you can buy 300, 300, 300, 300. You can do this. All right? Things like this. This is a book you should have. It's a fairly thick book, but it has no theory. It has no pictures. It has no exclamation points. It has no narrative. But what it has is solutions on how to work with kids. And I talk about this is one of the things we talk about it as a representative of higher education. We do a terrible job talking to teachers about how to actually deal with behaviors and how to address behaviors. So this is a book that you should have, like every one of your buildings should have one of these copies. Okay? And so it has a list, and I'm just going to go through the table of contents and show you why I think this book is important. It's got academic things. What I focus on is the behavior things, all right? So for example, okay, you've got a kid who, you're seeing in the back, needs verbal questions and directions frequently repeated, okay? You got a kid like this in your class? What do you got here? You can see, just suggestions. How many suggestions? Whoops, go back. 105 suggestions on how to deal with this. Not everyone is perfect. Not everyone is designed for the kids with whom you work. Some are for young kids, some are for old kids. But it has suggestions to help you as a part of this. And it has suggestions that you can then use that will be beneficial and things like this. Wait, I got another example for you. Okay? Does not listen to what other students are saying. You probably don't have this problem, so just let me just talk about this one just for my own S&G. But it's interesting about this, right? 57 suggestions. 57 suggestions, and think about this, all right? Another one, fails to make appropriate use of study time. And what you can't see this in the back, maybe, but this is behavior 111 that they've talked about. So there's hundreds of these behaviors and suggestions like this. And you can see, fails to make appropriate use of study time. Okay? You can see this book is like 3 or 4 years old because it doesn't say turn off YouTube. Okay? Because that's me, that's my time suck of late, where I think it's Russian dash cam videos for me. Things like this. Okay? But you can see, don't go down that rabbit hole. Just don't. Just don't do it. Okay? Things like this. All right? Though I am watching the Netflix one, don't blank with cats. So, right. Okay. Throws temper tantrums. Okay. Okay. And temper tantrums, if you've ever seen a temper tantrum, good temper tantrums truly are works of art. Okay. And they're a valuable skill. There's something, and they're reinforced. It's how I got a new bike. And so, okay, I'm a bike racer. But it's interesting about this. So what do you think about this? Suggestions? Okay. Reacts physically in response to disappointment. Okay. Blurts out answers without being called on. Okay? You can't see this in the back, but this is behavior 208. This gives you some sense of the number of behaviors that are being covered as a part of this. Again, I get no money for endorsing this book. I get no money for telling you about it. I don't know the authors. But what it has is suggestions, because if you go to the Google and type in behavior problems, you're not sure exactly what you're going to get. But this has lists of things. List of things. So when districts call me with kids' behavior problems, what I often say, what have you tried from this book? And they often haven't tried things from this book, because what they do is they want me to pull up with a big van. I'll take the bad kids, take them away for these districts never to see these kids again. But it is a shared responsibility. So what you have to do is think about what behaviors, how to address these behaviors, and how to figure out what we can do as a part of this. So this is a book you guys should have at least one in your building that you guys could access. Again, it's a fairly thick book. If you can get the third edition is the exact same as the fourth edition. They just changed the cover. Okay, so I've got a book. It's in its third edition. We're just going to change the cover for the fourth edition and see if that works. Okay. Okay. So I'm pushing this out here because I want you to think about what we can do to help kids and what we can do as part of the shared responsibility that we have as a part of this. But back to Ella. Parents got an outside evaluation, found out that she had a learning disability, sued the school district pretty extensively, and talked about these things. All right? Okay? But what's interesting is the district. I was brought into the district after this. The district was still telling parents no evaluation at the end of the school year. They're not individualizing 504 services. All kids got the same 504 plan. And then all but ignoring, if a parent had a private evaluation, they wouldn't even read it. They would just file it. So you can see all these kinds of things. These are things that districts are doing. Okay? So back to what we're talking about here. So for me, when we talk about a shared responsibility, it all relates to, is the child receiving a free, appropriate public education? Okay? And that's what the emphasis has to be. Is the child receiving a free, appropriate public education? Now, some of you have come and talked to me about this. It's like, you say that you're full inclusion. I'm fine. I can't stand in front of you and say full inclusion for all individuals. My brother-in-law has profound intellectual disabilities, has an IQ of about 20, needs help toileting. Placing him in a general education classroom, I'm sorry, I can't defend that. So, but it also flies in the face of the eye of the IEP. I am a fan of inclusion. I am a huge fan of inclusion because what we often need to do is think about how to include kids. Because one of the biggest problems I see is working as a hearing officer is I just see decisions being made based on the child's disability label, not on the child's needs. And you have to make sure it's individualized to the child. Let me give you an example of something I was just recently involved in Ohio, where a kid, actually two brothers, two ninth grade fraternal twin brothers. One was eligible for, as a kid with intellectual disabilities, one was not eligible for special education. The kid who was eligible for, as a kid with intellectual disabilities, was picked up 20 minutes before his brother. Every single day, they would drive around the county picking up other kids, and then he would get to school 20 minutes after his brother. Okay? And at the end of the day, the same thing would occur. He'd leave school 20 minutes before his brother, get home 20 minutes after his brother. Okay? Did he need special transportation? There is nothing indicating he needs special transportation. Why? Okay? Is it a physical thing? No, it's not a physical thing. The kid is a backup guard on the football team. He has a bigger upper body than I do, which I know you find hard to believe, but it can happen. Okay, but he was very strong, things like this. He also, this class also, all the kids in this classroom for kids with intellectual disabilities had to take adapted PE. Okay, he's a backup guard on the football team. He can dunk a basketball. He don't need no stinking adapted PE. Decisions were being made based on his disability label, not based on his individual needs. The third example, this is the kicker that actually brought me in, is that all the kids in this class, they had to eat lunch at the same table with the teacher. Right? Remember, one of the joys of high school was you got to mill around and eat with the people and get away from the people you didn't want to eat with. It wasn't so much going to as getting away from. So he had to eat lunch with his classmates. Because why? Why? 5 years ago, one of the kids from this class had been in a fight and caused some problems in class, and had inappropriately said something to a school cheerleader. Okay? I don't think any kid has since then said anything inappropriately to a school cheerleader. Okay? But it's interesting about this, but these decisions were being made based on his disability label, not on his individual needs. So make sure we talk about this and look at the individual needs of the child, not on the individual label, things like this. And this is what trips up districts. Second thing what I often see is we inappropriately exclude kids or call attention to their disability. Right? I'm in a school right now where every single teacher lists outside their classroom the subject matter they teach. Okay? So the French teacher has, I'm the French teacher, Spanish teacher, English teacher, science, things like this, special ed teacher. There are kids who do not want to go to that class because they don't want to be known associated with this. So actually we've changed all the teachers' signs to the teachers' names. The world kept spinning. Things continued, all right? Or my least favorite this past year is in the high school yearbook, they had the class composite pictures of the 9th grade students, the 10th grade students, the 11th grade students, the 12th grade students, and then the special ed students. Okay? Not only do we often do these, we are all our own worst enemy on these things. We have to think about how we can individualize services for these kids and have them included as much as possible. These kids did not need to be in the special ed class picture. They could be part of one of the other classes. So think about how we can get these kids to be included as much as possible. So I'm not going to stand in front of you and say full inclusion, but I can say we can do better inclusion, where these kids are not called out. We're not things like this. Because what I highlighted this yesterday, but in one of my sessions, but one thing we have to think about is society. I did a study of what society thinks special ed is. Pay attention to these numbers as I go through them. But I did a study of what society thinks special ed is. Society, these are non-educators, so they're not smart like you guys. Okay? Okay? They think that 80% of special ed is kids with Down syndrome. Truly, that's what they think. Okay? 5% is kids who are deaf. 5% are kids who are blind. Bet you didn't see that one coming. 5% are kids who have wheelchairs. and 5% are kids who have autism. That's truly what they think society thinks special education is. So when we talk about including kids, they don't understand that the vast majority of kids in your buildings are identified as special ed are kids with learning disabilities who have no facial characteristics, who often have no physical characteristics whatsoever that signifies that they have a disability. Same things with many of the kids who are eligible for speech or OHI, which is not a category I'm going to try to define for you right now. So it's interesting about this. Right? Nope, not going to do it. So it's interesting about this. Most of these kids don't have physical characteristics. So what you have to think about is this is especially for those in elementary. When you are going through the initial evaluation of a child to determine that the child is eligible for special education, and you find that the child's eligible, and you say, we're going to get this child needs special ed, we're going to provide services, think of what parents think special ed is. They think it's kids with Down syndrome in a special classroom down the hall, and that's what their kid is going to go to. Explain to them, first, that Down syndrome isn't even one of our categories, and that kids with intellectual disabilities is a small, it's only about 6.5% of your school special education population. So, that most kids with disabilities are kids with learning disabilities. Explain these things. Let them go see, explain this. But parents often have a lot of animosity relating to this. And you guys, they trust you, and they look to you for guidance. They look to you for understanding about this. So it's important for you to convince and explain these things to them as a part of this. Because parents often only, even if the child is ineligible for special ed, they typically only know 2, maybe 3 people in a school district. They know their child's principal. They know their child's teacher, which would often be you. The third person they might know is not the special ed teacher. The third person they might know is the child's bus driver. So they look to you for the guidance. So make sure you explain these things to them and explain to them what's going to actually occur for them, right? And explain to what's going on, right? So I'm going to move on, but FAPE is what we're asking for kids eligible for special education. So the big thing is if a kid is not making progress, we have to do something. We have to arrange it so the kid makes progress. So let's go back to Josh, okay? He was not making progress, all right? There's a special ed acronym that I really want you to pay attention to. It's not a typical one, and it's not one I made up. I make up acronyms all the time. Like I was presenting on Tuesday to a bunch of principals, and what did I say? We need to implement the IEP based on the ESY determination for the LRE and make sure that those services are in the IHOP. And they're going, yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah. Yeah. I said that because I was hungry and I wanted pancakes. So, okay. But they're not, yeah, sure, things like this, all right? So this truly is a special acronym that I want you to think about. The acronym is, and I'll tell you the acronym first before I tell you what it means. It's KOSHK. KOSHK. Okay? KOSHK. Okay? I pronounce it Kusk, not after the small town in northern Idaho that I camped in one summer. Okay? But it's Kusk. And it stands for new, as in K-N-E-W, knew or should have known. Knew or should have known. Right? KOSHK stands for knew or should have known. Okay? Let's go back to Josh. We knew at the end of the first marking period that things weren't going well for him. All right? As you heard me say just a few minutes ago, basically a red flag was being waved in the faces. You should do something about this. So we have teachers who say it's not my obligation. Actually, it is. It is your obligation. It's your obligation to make sure that people are aware of what have you tried to arrange it so this kid could be successful. It is your obligation to do something. So, if Josh is not making progress, if he's not doing well, you need to do something. What do you need to do? Change the grouping, change the reading material, change the instruction, change his seating pattern, change something, and then document the snot out of that. Change something. And pay attention to what's going on with him because we know he's not doing well. Okay? We know he's not doing well. And it's your job to be implementing these things and trying these things. All right? So when we talk about this, And this may seem really strange, and it may seem that I'm looking at this in a very legalistic way. But if you haven't been involved in a special ed lawsuit, I can get you one. Okay, I can get you one. I know people. All right, things like this, but they're coming your way. They truly are. And what we're doing is, I'm doing witness preparation on Monday for a due process hearing, and I'm going to talk to the general education teacher. And the questions I'm going to be asking are: when did you know there were problems? All right. What did you do? If you didn't do anything, you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to put this teacher on the stand because we're going to lose. And we're going to have to pay an enormous sum of money to not only the parent's attorney, but put a pot of sum of money in for what's going on for that kid to draw down in the future on, called Comp Ed. So when I talk about, do you have a responsibility in this? Oh my God, yes. You have a very big, important responsibility because it's up to you to be implementing some of these things. Now, go back to the teacher that I told you earlier about, Kim, who has the 22 kids who had the preferred seating, right? In her classroom, 22 out of 25. Is there an issue there? Yeah. But what you need to do is make sure you come to the meetings and make sure you participate. Make sure you come to the meetings and make sure you participate. When I lead meetings and I see a teacher sitting in the back grading, that's when I break out my taser. Okay? I didn't bring it because I'm flying, so I left it at home. But it's interesting about this, or I kick them under the table, something like this. Or when the teacher's playing Sudoku. Come to the meetings and pay attention. Come to the meetings and pay attention. You'll be surprised what you'll learn about these kids. You'll be surprised what you need to understand. But then when we make informed decisions about what's going on with these kids, you can make an informed decision that helps understand and provides guidance about what we can do with these kids and help understand where we are with these kids. Come to the meetings. And I'm really pissed. Okay? I'm on a rant right now. Okay? Right? Is when I get really pissed is I'm working with a district right now where what they do is they hold all their IEP meetings first thing in the morning. Okay? It's fine. It works with the parents before they go to work. And I'll explain to you about my town in a little bit. But it's interesting. They hold the IEP meetings then. The teacher who is free is the PE teacher. Right? So the PE teacher is the teacher who goes to all these meetings. Right? The PE teacher doesn't know what these kids look like. Doesn't understand what's going on, but the district saying, yeah, we're doing just fine. We have a teacher at all our meetings. This PE teacher doesn't understand first, maybe a great PE teacher, actually is a nice guy, but he doesn't understand the content of what you're doing, things like this. But he doesn't know what these kids do. So what my recommendation is, have the PE teacher go cover the class of the teacher for a short period of time so someone who actually even knows what the kid looks like can participate in the meetings. It's not a permanent solution. It's not like the PE teacher is going to be covering this class for the rest of his life. No, it's just for a part of the time so the general education teacher can come participate in what's going on. So we have an accurate reflection of where we are with this and can say truly how this kid is performing in the class. Okay? The second thing about this, when I talk to teachers, when I say this, and we talk about this, is make sure you get good information. You provide good information about how this kid is performing in your class. And when I say good information, is what I often mean is behavior data. Behavior data. Because we have grades out the wazoo, okay? And from other places too. But we need behavior data. We need behavior data. And so when I talk about behavior data, how often does this kid mill around, or how does this kid do at this time? And so just basically frequency counts, or duration kinds of things. And what I often do is I also train paraprofessionals to take this data, or an aide in the classroom, because the teachers are teaching. Teaching is hard. Teaching is hard. And I stand in front of you. I come very proudly from a family of educators. Education is what we do in our family. My dad was my superintendent. My mom is a teacher. My wife teaches ESL. My daughter just graduated from college last month. Yeah, no tuition this semester. She's going back to become a special education teacher. Okay? This is what we do in our family. My son he's working in a business right now. He's going to be a teacher someday. He doesn't know it. Okay? But I share this with, I stand in front of you proudly as education is what we do. Teaching is hard. How hard is it? Because you have to spend an enormous amount of your day convincing kids to do things that they do not want to do. I'm truly serious about this. Okay, my first couple of years of teaching, I was married. My wife she was undergrad, still my wife, but she's Right? She was underage, and at Friday nights at 7:30, she'd say, let's go out. Like hell that was going to happen. I was exhausted. It wasn't physical exhaustion. It was mental exhaustion. Because I used to run ultra marathons, 50-mile races. I'd do those. Regular marathons, that's just for wusses. I do the ultra marathons, things like this. So it wasn't a physical manifestation. I was just mentally exhausted because I'd have a group of kids over here doing something really fun, and I'd say, kids, come over here. Let's do something more fun. It's called phonics. No. So I'd spend any time. So make sure you get information when you write up. And I'm talking about this. We'll come back to the write-up in a second. When you write up your information or share this information at meetings, you talk about how this child is doing compared to average kids in your classroom. Okay? Because too often what I see is a write-up or information about how this kid is only on task 55% of the time. That sounds terrible. He's off task 45% of the time. If the rest of the class is also off task 45% of the time, then that kid is doing exactly where the kid is supposed to be. So give me a comparison about how this kid is doing compared to several of the average kids. Not the high achieving, not the low achieving, but the average kids. Give me some sense of what's going on with these kids. Give me some sense of what we're doing so we can make informed decisions about this kid. Okay? And it's often behaviors. Because we can handle problems with kids who have reading problems. We can handle problems who need extra time for math, things like this. It's the behavior issues. So when I talk about training paraprofessionals or aides to take data, think about it as a series of snapshots. A series of snapshots, not a long video. So they don't have to come and observe the kid all day or for a week. Take data from like 9 to 9:25, 5 days in a row, and see how this kid is doing compared to other things. And then we graph that and get some sense of how this kid is doing. Talk about this, but explain that we want, from the paraprofessionals or aides, that we want like frequency count, but we also want anecdotal information about what the kid is doing. What best example I can give to you is I was working with a paraprofessional in November. Kid was having trouble, he was out of his seat a lot, things like this. So she sat on one side of the room, I sat on the other. And so we did this, and what's interesting about this is he got up out of his seat in a 45-minute period. He only got up out of his seat once. So she comes over to, I marked it down, 1. She was very proud. The interesting thing about it is he was out of his seat for 42 of the 45 minutes, milling around, banging people in the head and doing things like this. She had her 1. I had a list of several pages of anecdotal stuff about what he was doing. So talk to your aides about this, but talk about it as a snapshot, as opposed to a long video. That makes better sense and gives us a better sense because they have responsibilities that they need to go cover and things that they do. So if you can get an aide to come in while you're teaching just to take some data about how this kid and maybe a few others are doing, you get a really good understanding of where we are with this kid. But it makes sense as we talk about this and makes sense as we address this. Okay? So keep this in mind. Okay? More. Right? So what is SDI? Okay? What is SDI? It's a term I made up. Yeah. Yep. It was popular in the 80s and things like this. What is SDI? Okay. It's the core of instruction. It's the core of instruction. Some of these kids need specially designed instruction. You're going to hear people say that treating kids equally, giving everyone the same is equal. It's not. It's truly not. Okay? Some kids need a little bit more time processing the tests. Some kids need more time processing the questions. Some kids need more time just processing what's going on. You need to make sure that you can do this. Do they need an IEP to give them extra time? No, they actually don't. You can do this. You can give extra time to a kid. You see a kid who needs extra time in this. Or you see a kid who's distracted by the kid sitting next to them. Okay? Does this kid need an IEP in order to move this kid away from the distraction kid? No, you can do these things. You don't need formal documentation telling you these things. It's just whatever makes it best for your classroom. Okay? Because I had a kid, and my classroom, my first 2 years of teaching, was located very close to a train track. Right? And we had big windows, beautiful windows. I love the windows, things like that. But when the train came by, there was no attention given in my classroom. Because they were looking at the trains. Things like this. So I'd take a few minutes to recollect them back and pay attention to where we are with this. But I realized in the middle of a test, they needed their train fix. So you have 10 minutes to finish this test. No, here, just take a little bit longer kinds of things. Just realize that there's things that happen in schools that you have to pay attention to, okay? And you have to let this alter. But does a kid need a formal IEP to get extra time? No. But if you should notice this, and when you talk about accommodations, maybe later explain, this kid maybe takes a little bit longer. Just to address this. Now, does it mean the kid needs a formal IEP? No. But we talk about this, okay? Then this just goes back to that 504 document that I want to address, is that accommodations do not change the content. They do not change the content. Basically allows people to participate without any change of the content. Modification changes the content. And that's what we often, and so that 504 document talks about this, but we need to do a good job of making sure teachers understand this. Kids eligible for special education often need modifications based on their needs. Not necessarily for everything. There are some kids it's for everything, but based on their individual needs. So we need to talk about this, okay? It must be considered, we'll talk about the evaluation process as a part of this, okay? What is SDI? Specially designed instruction. They describes the instruction so you can make so that the kids can make progress in the general curriculum. That is our goal. That is our goal, for kids to make progress. For kids to make progress in the general curriculum so that they're not just remaining stagnant, okay? But it also, we want to reduce the skill gap, okay? Many of you are aware of this. But by the time we identify kids as eligible for special education, that they're often several years behind where they need to be. And we need to do what we can to reduce that gap as much as possible. So we need to pay attention closely to methods that work with them and try different things and pay attention very close to what we do to help reduce this, okay? But it may change the content, the methodology, or delivery of what's going on. I remember real specifically when I was first teaching, I only had 3 or 4 kids at a time. 3 or 4 kids at a time. We were talking about this up here. I had a kidney table. I called a kidney table in 2 ways, because of the way it's shaped, but also because the way you lean up against it, you press up against your kidneys. Yeah, but you understand exactly what I mean by this. But I was working with 3 or 4, and in the old days, you might not be aware of this. In the old days, this is back in the mid-90s. Okay, some of you don't remember the mid-90s very well. Just keep your hand down. That just pisses me off. Okay? But in the old days, kids eligible for special ed often did not take state tests. During the state assessment period, you don't believe me. It's true. It's true. Okay? So I had all 24 all day. It's like, how do you teach 24 kids? I had to provide instruction to, I was used to doing 3 or 4 at a time. But I was used to providing that kind of individualized instruction that they need. So you have to think about these things, right? Things have changed. That doesn't happen anymore, okay? More, okay? SDI, what you have to think about is, what can we do to shape it so kids can receive instruction? And it may mean extra time. It may mean extra practice. It may mean extra adaptations for what's going on. But you have to think of what we need to do so that the kid, in the end, can understand where we are this, okay? That meets the unique needs that result from the student's disability. Now, what's interesting about this is there are many things that we do that benefit all. And we have to think about how we benefit these things that benefit all, okay? So example, just a classic one, which I do in my college classes, is I put an outline. One of my students needs help with an outline in their college class, so they can just follow where we are with this. So I put an outline on my board at the beginning of each class. Okay? I tell the students who don't have disabilities that they can't look at it. I still catch them looking at it. But it's interesting. It benefits all. I mean, there's a lot we talk about that benefit all. And this all stems, we can talk about UDL and Universal Design for Learning, and how we provide instruction so that everyone benefits from these things. Okay? I mean, there's a lot of things we have. UDL, just to remind you, comes from architecture. And there's a lot of things that we do in architecture that benefit everyone. It's like when you go to Walmart, okay? The home of cheap plastic crap. When you go there, doors automatically open for you. Okay? It's not designed for you. It's designed for people who use wheelchairs, walkers, crutches, and canes. Okay? But we benefit from it so that we can carry our stuff out without having to open doors. These are the kinds of things we need to talk about more. Right? So more. SDI is different from other educational things. We can talk about MTSS. I was speaking in Tennessee on Tuesday, and they said, how much longer are we going to have this MTSS stuff? And so it's going to be around. Don't worry about this. Okay? But it's different from personalized learning, but you can see what we do is we build on all these things. MTSS, personalized learning, UDL, and direct instruction. So all these things help provide the SDIs for the kid and can help as part of our shared responsibility, okay? Because it takes time, it takes energy, and it takes motivation from us to actually do this. But the motivation is that these kids need this, and they depend on us to do these things. And it's us who are providing these services. Wait, there's more, okay? So how to MTS? Some of you may have seen this. I came up with this model. Yeah, there's things like this. I came up with the food pyramid also. Okay. I've developed a lot of things. Right? The Electoral College. Yep. No. Okay. I wouldn't have come up with that one. Okay. But it's interesting. You see how these use strategies to overcome these difficulties, the intensity of what's going on. And one thing is people don't often talk about this is when we talk about tiers, you often have to think about it for behaviors. And we talk about tiers. Is some kids wax and wane between this. We don't say the kids are just tier 1. They kind of go ebb and flow between this depending on their subjects. And we need to remind ourselves of this. The best example I can give you is a personal example. When I was in 4th grade, I got really sick. I did not have an IEP, but I got really sick in 4th grade. I developed a really severe case of the chicken pox. I missed about 3.5 weeks of school. Okay? Went back to school for 3 days. Developed then scarlet fever. Yeah, no relation. Things like this. Missed another 3 weeks of school. Okay? Had winter break, came back for 3 days, had a relapse of the chicken pox. Missed another 3 weeks of school, things like this, all right, things like this. Mom talks about it as the best year of her life. We bonded, we watched all 3 channels, we had a great time, okay? But it was interesting about this. We talk about this, but I share this with you, is when I went back to school, my class in 4th grade had mastered long division. I didn't understand what the heck that thing was. Like, put in front of me, I had no clue whatsoever, okay? I needed help. Okay? So I needed additional assistance. So I'm working my way up this because I needed assistance at that point. I needed things like this. So I did not like the assistance that was provided because it was before school and during gym. I got extra help from the teacher to help me to master long division. I ended up doing it, and I guess I get encouraged and got motivated because I wanted to go to gym, things like this. But you can see how kids don't actually go into these things. They ebb and flow. And it's based on their individual needs. Some kids can go in and out of these things. It's not like they're going to be in tier 2 for the rest of their lives. So you have to think about it individualizing to the kid. Wait, there's more. Okay? UDL, we've talked about UDL, but you can see all these different things that are part of UDL and build on this. But I'm going to start flowing. All right? I'm going to start talking faster. Okay? I come from a family of auctioneers. So if I start talking too fast, just raise your hand, ask a question, or make a bid. It works for me. Okay? Personalized learning. You have to think about personalized instruction for kids. Personalized learning so that the kids can actually benefit from what they're doing. So they understand where we are with this. You have to think about how to address these things. I'm betting if you personalize things for some of these kids that other kids are going to benefit from it in a class. And you have to think about this and modify what's going on. Our goal, you have to remind yourselves, our goal is to get these kids to the maximum extent possible involved in the general education classroom. And you may have heard this before, that most kids with disabilities spend most of their time in the general education classroom. That's just the reality of the situation. They're not pulled out, as I highlighted for you a few minutes ago, pulled out to a separate location as parents often think. But what we have is we have opportunities for us to provide that personalized instruction. Now, does it all have to be written down? No. You can provide this because based on the needs that you see for that moment for these kids. But if you continue to have to do these things, then write it down and then talk to the team members as a part of this. Okay, more. Okay? So it talks about specially designed instruction and modifying specially designed instruction. Talks about content. Changes the knowledge, the methodology, and the delivery. All right? I've said that on a previous one. Okay? But I talk about that. Right? Content. Change what is taught. Change what is taught. I saw a great lesson the other day. It was a sixth grade social studies lesson, and it was a great lesson on the causes of the Great Depression. Okay? The causes of the Great Depression. There were kids in there who are going. So the content talked about there's some kids in there who are going to list off all 6 causes of the Great Depression. Go. I bet. See how many of you can list off all 6. No, don't do it right now, okay? Things like this. What they were hoping for is there's a kid in the classroom who has significant reading problems and has trouble paying attention. He's going to start thinking about more about just maybe 1 or 2 of those causes of the Great Depression and get the big idea of that there was an economic collapse and in combination with that was happening in the Plain States relating to the Dust Bowl. Things like this that happens contemporaneously with each other cause society to have economic problems. And so talk about these things as opposed to listing off 6 specific causes. He's talking more that there were some economic problems relating to this. The methodology, how things are taught or how learning is demonstrated. So what the teacher did for us, for him, is when she said, guys, all right, here's a quick quiz. I want you to list off the 6 causes of the Great Depression. She went to that kid first. And he said, just give me 1. Things like this. It was other students she knew were going to be tested more on what the 5, 6 were, things like this. So he actually only had to come up with 1 as a part of this, the first one, as opposed to like the 4th, 5th, or 6th one on these things like this. And the delivery, how we adapt these things to how we adapt what's going on. We have to think about modifying it so kids can actually understand what's going on. Some of these kids need multiple steps, multiple repetitions. They need multiple examples. I remember teaching a kid, what's interesting about this, teaching long division to a kid one time, and he was not getting it. And I'd spent an enormous amount of time, and he was very attracted to the girl sitting next to him. So I said, can you come over here and teach him? And she did. And I said to her, what did you do? She said, I'm not going to tell you. So do what you need to do to get these things in. Right? More. Right? Adapted content. Okay? Learn different material. Learn different material so you understand what's going on. Okay? So some of these students, they may need continued practice on fractions. And we need to give kids more examples and hands-on learning to these kinds of things so they understand exactly where we are with this. So we can modify this. And it does pose a significant problem, so we can address these kinds of things. But we need to adapt these. Okay? Or during a different standard than other students. Is this okay? Yes, this is okay. All right? Some people will say it's not fair. And you hear this all the time. Does everything have to be the exact same for everyone? Everything does not have to be the same. Because I'm betting there are some kids who may not be eligible for special education, who may be in your class, who are some of your favorite students. Right? You would take a whole class of these students if you had the chance. Some of these favorite students, some of you give extra time, extra supports for them. Because why? Because you like them. Right? Some of these kids, I'm going to put it out here, we have in special ed, you don't always like, okay? But we need to make sure we provide those kinds of, give them opportunities for different assessments and different opportunities to explain things, okay? And maybe excuse from particular questions about as the detail that we have as a part of this. So what we have to think about is what can we do to provide assistance, okay? So I got a methodology example, okay? Audio recordings. Access to outlines of the lessons, written lists of instructions, modified words, modified assessments. These are all important things that we can pay attention to. And these are all things we have to think. Okay? So I'm going to take some questions, but one thing I really want you to pay attention to is that acronym I said to you earlier, KOSHK. You need to pay attention. If you've got a kid who's failing or having problems in your school, or starting to show behavior problems, because kids, again, don't neatly raise their hand saying, I'm having problems. They start throwing, kicking, screaming, yelling. You need to pay attention to why is this happening, right? I remember my dad, he moved away when I was in 7th grade for a year to go work on a degree. He came back, but I had behavior problems. And it's interesting, I didn't signify, I didn't raise my hand a lot, so I get moved closer to the teacher. Okay, did I like it? No, I was not happy with this because the teacher smelled. Okay? But I share this with you is that sometimes we do these things. And when we talk about priority seating, it doesn't mean necessarily close to the teacher. It means close to wherever the activity where the kid needs to learn the material. And you have to think about the variety of things that their kids are observing and what they're paying attention to. But I often see when I'm in classrooms, where do we often see the kids eligible for special ed? They're seated in the far back, way in the back of the classroom where they see all that's going on. We are unnecessarily segregating these kids. We are unnecessarily causing these kids problems. So what I want you to think about is all opportunities to integrate these kids, all opportunities to provide inclusion for these kids, all opportunities so that you don't necessarily call out that these children have disabilities. Because as I said before, these kids do not have disabilities because they choose to have a disability. They have it at no fault of themselves. And what we have to think about is what we can do to be supportive. So pay attention to that acronym. Pay attention to what you can do just to be a decent human being, including these kids. And the last thing is you don't have to have the accommodations specifically listed. You can provide extra time. Right? Because I'm betting there are times when kids come to school sick, you give them more access to the bathroom. You don't need a written plan saying, kid is sick, I'm going to provide extra access to the bathroom. You just go, quickly, please, kinds of things. That's the kind, you need to use that kind of urgency for some of these kids and pay attention to providing them those kinds of supports. Okay? So that's all I got, but I'm willing to take questions because we have 5 more minutes for questions. So, any questions? We will make sure you get a copy of that 504 document, okay? And we want you to use that and distribute it widely. But I do also recommend that book. Again, I'm not endorsing that book, but I want to thank you very much for your time and attention.